Let me call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Plan Commission for November 6th, 2023. Let's begin by calling the roll.
Ballard?
Here.
Seaboard?
Here.
Korodke?
Here.
Kinsey?
Here.
St. John?
Here.
Whistler?
Here.
Thank you.
So, looks like we have 5 commissioners present tonight. Nobody joining us online, right?
You have 6 here and no one on.
I'm sorry, 6. We had a late addition. I counted a little bit too early. Okay, great. Let me just give a quick overview of the agenda tonight. We will have minutes, then we'll have reports, resolutions, communications. We have two petitions that are tabled, and I'll just mention those briefly now. SP 24-22, that's Cutters Kirkwood 123 LLC, the property at 115 East Kirkwood Avenue. And then also ZO 34-23, that is the text amendments to the UDO brought by the City of Bloomington Planning and Transportation. That was tabled after being continued from October. So we won't be taking any action or hearing those this evening. We have one petition that we will be hearing this evening, DP 36-23, petitioner Paul Pruitt, property at 1100 South Brooks Drive. So that will be the entire agenda this evening. Let's start with minutes to be approved.
You didn't actually get any minutes. That was false. Sorry. So you will see those October minutes in December.
All right, so October 9th minutes are not ready. We'll bring those, we'll revisit those in November. Are there any other reports, resolutions, or communications from staff?
Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager, we have one report. He'll hate this so much, but it's not probably unexpected. Tonight is City Attorney Mike Rooker's last plan commission. This is his last day with the city. So we want to publicly say thank you to Mike from the department. Huge loss for us and the city, but we're so happy for him to be able to start a new adventure. I'm sure you can imagine this one's been quite a trip. He's been here for 14 years. I want to say it's hard to quantify how much work he's done here, but as I said, it's been 14 years, 4 years with us. You obviously see him at public meetings. We see him every week. Weekly, at least once, hundreds and hundreds of meetings with us in our 4 years. And he gives us such great guidance with professionalism, humor, and real care for finding the best answer. So we just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I can say that I've worked with quite a few councils in this building over the years, and without question, Mike is one of the most diligent and hardworking folks I've had the pleasure of working with. So thank you, and you'll be missed. Anything else?
Nope, that's all we've got. Thanks.
All right. Any reports or communications from commissioners?
I have one.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kinsey.
So I am the appointed representative to the Safe Streets and Roadways for All committee, and this is a committee that is poised to act on the, I think this is a federal project, and the committee includes representatives from bike and pedestrian safety and some other traffic commissions, and I think it's a really interesting project, and this will, we had only our first meeting to hear from Tool Design Group, the group that's supposed to help guide the community on this initiative. So I just want to make sure the public is aware that this group will continue meeting, and I think it's potentially really exciting to try and improve safety on our roadways for bikes, peds, and people and everybody. So I think it's really interesting, and I hope people can tune in. There hasn't been any action yet, but there will be. So thanks.
Thank you. All right, any other communications, reports from commissioners? All right, then we will move on to our sole petition for this evening, DP 36-23. Looks like we've got Gabriel Holbrow here as the case manager to present. Take it away.
Yes, I'm Gabriel Holbrow, zoning planner for the city of Bloomington, and we are here about, let's see, DP 36-23. It's a secondary plat approval for a proposed subdivision at 1100 South Brooks Drive. The location is on the east side of town. It's, as you can see on the map on the right, it's a stub of Brooks Drive that comes north off of Covenanter and ends at this property. It's on the left side as you go up that way. The total area of the existing lot that's proposed to be subdivided is 0.71 acres. It's zoned residential medium lot, R2. In the comprehensive plan, it's designated as the neighborhood residential future land use area. The property contains one detached single-family dwelling. It's not located in a local historic district, but the existing house is listed as contributing on the 2018 Survey of Historic Sites and Structures. It contains this one single-family dwelling. All surrounding properties also contain single-family detached dwellings. The petitioner proposes to subdivide the existing property into two lots. There's lot 1 is the southern of the two, that will, where the existing house will be. Lot 2 is to the north of that. Lot 2 will initially be vacant. The petitioner has stated that Lot 2 will be available for a future residential house, and the future Lot 2 could be developed with any use allowed under the UDO in the R2 district or whatever zoning district is applicable at the time.
If you could speak a little bit closer to the mic, it's
Sure.
hard to hear.
Lot 2 will initially be vacant. The petitioner has stated that Lot 2 will be available for a future residential house. In the future, Lot 2 can be developed with any use allowed under the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, in the R2 district, or if this were ever rezoned, for whatever will be allowed in the zoning district that it would be rezoned to in the future. No rezone proposal at this time. The existing property has a significant number of trees, including approximately 0.46 acres of closed canopy wooded area, as that is defined by the UDO. The proposal includes some tree clearing to make room for a possible house site on Lot 2, while retaining existing canopy cover on the south side of Lot 1, the north side of Lot 2, and the west side of both lots. The proposed area for tree removal is up to 0.16 acres, which is 34.8% of the existing canopy cover. And the proposed area to be preserved is 0.3 acres, so a little more than 65% of the existing canopy cover. In the UDO, under tree and forest preservation, there are minimum requirements for vegetation, for retaining canopy. For this property, about 65% is currently covered by the closed canopy wooded area. So we look at this row of the table, they're required to keep at least 60%. They're keeping a little more than 65%, so it's compliant with tree and preservation standards. Because the area of canopy cover that's required to be preserved is less than 1/2 acre, the UDO does not require a conservancy easement or tree preservation easement. Moving on to the right-of-way, this is turned on its side, compared to the other ones. So here, north is to the right, and at the south edge is the right-of-way of Brooks Drive, and to the north, you can see Lot 1 on the left, Lot 2 on the right. The building outline you can see on Lot 2 is a proposed possible building outline. That building doesn't exist, but on the left, upper left, that building is there. In order to comply with the proposed right-of-way in the transportation plan, the secondary plat is dedicating 10 feet of additional right-of-way width. And in that additional right-of-way, there's a 6-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot tree plot. Also in this area, there are some utilities. There's an existing public water line, and then the existing water lateral to the existing house, and a proposed water service line to Lot 2. Existing public sanitary line in the street, proposed lateral in a utility easement on the property of Lot 1 to serve Lot 2. The house that's currently on the property and will be on Lot 2 has a sewer connection to the west. There's also a gas line. I'm highlighting all of these because you'll notice that there are 8 small trees on the left side in front of Lot 1 in the tree plot as required, and they are spaced to be at least 10 feet from all the laterals, which is actually not even required by the UDO, but is good practice, and at least 5 feet from the public water line. 10 feet is preferred, but the UDO does allow it to be 5 feet in these situations, and since the existing public water line is running right along that side of the street, 5 feet is the most that could be provided while still providing street trees. The existing water line not only provides service to these, but also provides service to an existing fire hydrant that's in the, it will be in the proposed right-of-way, and you'll notice that the sidewalk jogs a little bit to go around that fire hydrant. So the sidewalk maintains the full 6 feet of width the entire way. The general compliance criteria for secondary plat is compliance with the UDO, compliance with other applicable regulations, compliance with utility service and improvement standards, and finally compliance with prior approvals. Staff is proposing a finding that the plat complies with all the requirements of the UDO. The plat's compliant with the transportation plan. There are no other known applicable regulations that would apply to this subdivision. The plat and the accompanying site improvement plan and site grading and drainage plan were accepted by the City of Bloomington Utilities on October 23rd as compliant with CBU's utility service and improvement standards. And finally, the secondary plat complies with the primary plat for this subdivision as approved by the Plat Committee on September 11th. In conclusion, the proposed subdivision complies with all standards in the UDO. The small 2-lot subdivision is appropriate infill development within an already developed neighborhood. With that, the Planning and Transportation Department's recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt the proposed findings and approve the secondary plat of DP-36-23, also plat 2023-09-0012, with one condition, that the petitioner shall provide a financial performance guarantee in compliance with UDO section 20.06.060C3E3 before the Planning and Transportation Director signs and seals the plat and before the petitioner files the secondary plat for recording in the Office of the Monroe County Recorder. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add anything to the presentation? Step up to the podium and state your name and
Hi,
take it
my
away.
name's Paul Pruitt. I really don't have anything to add. We've worked with Gabriel and Jackie for the last several months to make sure that this subdivision complied with all aspects of the UDO, and they've been very helpful in that regard. So I really have nothing to add.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners for the petitioner or for the staff?
Just a quick question for staff. What exactly is the financial performance guarantee?
Essentially, it's a bond or, I forget the letter of credit, I think, something like that. Anyway, a bond or similar instrument so that if the improvements that are shown on the site improvement plan don't get built, that the city could use the bond to have the financial resources to put them in the city itself.
Thank you.
Gabriel, one more question on that. Is that pretty standard for these kinds of
Yes, it is a requirement of the UDO.
Okay.
One could argue that it doesn't need to be a condition because it's already in the UDO. We felt that it was helpful to put it in there just to be extra super clear about what has to happen before recording.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question. This is R2, so can you tell us what can be built there then? What's allowed?
Yeah, R2, it's a residential, by design, it's a residential district. So the main thing would be single-family detached dwelling. That's mostly what's in R2. There are a small number of other uses that the UDO considers compatible with that are also allowed. These include group home, small. So essentially, it's still a single-family house, but there might be some services provided to someone. A child care home, as licensed by the state of Indiana, can be located here in someone's residence. A home occupation is what we call it. So if someone has a business out of their home, that can be approved by conditional use permit. And in R2, a duplex as well. A duplex is defined as a two-family dwelling under one roof. That can be approved by conditional use permit. That would, as with a home occupation, conditional use approval requires a public hearing and notice that's separate. And there was one other, an accessory dwelling unit would also be allowed here. That does not require a public hearing, but there are standards that have to be met.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right. We will then move to public comment. If you'd like to make public comment on DP 36-23, if you're in the chambers, just make your way up to the podium, state your name for the record, and then you'll have up to 5 minutes to make your comment. If you're joining us online and would like to make comment, click on the reactions button on your app there and look for the raise hand button. If you raise your hand, we will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lisa Thomason, and I am a homeowner and have lived at 939 South High Street for, about 20 years. 24 years, almost 25. We got married in that house. We raised our children in that house. Their Christmas trees are on that property. And I'm also a homeowner on the property adjacent where my elderly mother-in-law now lives because she wanted to move into a beautiful, close area that's rural and wooded appearing, and so she's been happy there for the past year.
I'm sorry, would you mind getting a little closer to the mic? We're having a
Sure.
little trouble hearing you up here.
I apologize. So I'm also a property owner on the adjacent property where my elderly mother-in-law lives, and she wanted a wooded, beautiful area that would be very private. and quiet for her senior years. So, commissioners, I'm at a disadvantage. I'm not a developer. Don't have a multi-month relationship with planning department. I've been pleased to see what's been happening in the city where citizens have been listened to in spite of the procedures that exist. The monolith, of course, is the most recent example where boards that haven't really had that been their venue have stepped up to sort of protect what has followed due process but hasn't really involved citizen input. And I think a lot of that happens in planning, where a lot of the folks that are involved in planning, like the R2 and deciding what's happening in the city, are in fact developers. And I think, so sometimes citizens are at a disadvantage, and certainly in this situation, not having a job as a commissioner, where I spend a lot of time with this, or in planning, or as a developer, where it's my business and I hire lawyers and I'm speculative, I'm a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm just a homeowner here. And so I'm not able to do the research or give my time to that because I'm doing other things. But I am here to protect the major investment that I have, which is my home and the quality of life where I live, where I've seen my taxes go up, and we really haven't gotten any of that value our house is worth now because I'm still paying the mortgage and paying more taxes. But so I live there, and I really urge you to resist the subdivision of this wooded property on a dead-end street. It's the smallest lot in the whole area, and with subdivision, it becomes very, very small. It's out of character with the estate-sized lots that are already there. It's just not that kind of thing, and we don't even know what this could become, right? With R2, it could become a duplex. It could really change the character of a dead-end street, adding traffic, noise, and I think there's great value in protecting the wooded areas. You know, we don't have to develop every aspect. This property was bought by somebody who owns a lot of properties in this town and is well known in this town as a speculation. It's not been occupied since it was purchased from the family, as you heard last time, the family that had lived there for so many years. To their children, we tried to buy the lot to conserve it because we value having a wild space to help, you know, preserve the character of our city and the resources that we have, which includes these beautiful wooded areas in the center of town. We don't have to develop it all, and it's really going to change the quality of life for all of us who live there when you put a very small lot that's out of keeping with everything that's there, and we'll be taking out a significant number of trees. There doesn't have to be a conservancy easement, but there could be a conservancy easement to protect what's there. There's concern about the sensitivity of that area. It's uphill from everything that's to the south of it. That includes our property on one side. So we have very real concerns about what's going to happen here. I don't have a whole lot of time, which is unfortunate. I only have 5 minutes. This is my life. This has been terribly upsetting for us, having this happen. You know, I'd like us to think about the long-term sustainability of this city and preserving the trees that we have. You can't grow mature maples anymore. They're on this property. We have foxes that are there. We have the owls that we hear that are in the trees and the dead snags, and trees are going to be removed. There's going to be impermeable surfaces, even more than what is typical because there's a wider easement here. There are a lot of concerns that I have. I'm very, very sad about this. I don't think there's much that I can do about it. I was very pleased to hear the gentleman that gave this a continuation. That gave me a little bit of hope that we were heard, that the neighbors had very real concerns. I think that was probably false hope. I'm not a big developer. I'm not a speculator, and that's really what's happening here. So I would not be surprised that there will be a duplex that's going to go up there eventually when they find the highest bidder, and the trees are going to come out, and there's going to be runoff, and it's going to be just real sad for everybody on that street. It's a dead-end street. It comes off of Covenanter. They put speed bumps to slow the traffic there. There's a lot of carrying capacity, and I'm just going to implore the commissioners. I'm disappointed in planning. I understand that you have things that you need to do, that there's certain requirements that need to be met, and I would urge you to be creative in finding ways that you can preserve this piece of land in the middle of town and keep this from being developed and speculated by people who gamble for a living and profit from it and have deep pockets to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment?
I'm Mike Walsh. I have property just to the south of the old Manifold House. We moved in there in 1980, and I'm going to reflect what she has just said. It's been an area which supports a lot of wildlife. We have basically a deer herd, which I hope will always stay. A lot of people don't like that, but most of our neighbors do. And the whole condition of our neighborhood is, we've been there 43 years, and it's been substantially a very quiet and organized neighborhood on a dead-end street. My first concern when I heard about this, I went down and looked at the trees in this lot. And if you haven't been there, they're grouped in density right at the edge of where he's going to apparently build. And if I understood what the rules were, what is it, 65% is going to be preserved and 35% not, or vice versa, I can't remember. But the trees that are existing right there, it's going to take an enormous amount of work to take those out and take them down and get rid of them in order to put this up. I was surprised to hear that there was a second building that was going to be proposed, which raised a question in my mind of access to that building. Is there going to be a path, or how do you get back there? I was pleased to know, because I was worried this was going to be a plex, and it's apparently not. But it then raised the question of parking in an area that's a pretty, well, in fact, we've got children in there now for the first time. So I wish it weren't developed either. I don't know if it's, tilting a windmill here, but I just don't believe that it would be a good thing for our neighborhood. It would change the whole feeling of the neighborhood, and that's worth something. So I'm opposed to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment?
Hi, my name is Todd Thomason. I live at 939 South High Street. My mother, I just got my mother to move to Bloomington about 9 months ago. She's at the 1009. So between my wife and myself, our property, and my mother's property, we're bordering two sides of this Dr. Manifold's property, which is under the option to be subdivided, and along with the Walshes. We are all three sides. I don't know quite what else can be said. I think that the idea of the, and of course I don't have much time, so you can correct me, although I guess I have my mother's 5 minutes as well. But I think the idea of the unified development, the UDO, is really to provide a framework for how development may commence. Obviously, the city doesn't have the resources to, plan out 20, 30, 40, 50 years in advance what every acre in the city is going to look like. So they developed the plan as an overall framework. I realize that this plan may check off all the pieces to that plan. Yes, it meets this, yes, it meets it, yes, it meets these other things. But it doesn't necessarily, I guess the part that I'm having trouble with is, how does that make it a slam dunk that it's just going to be approved? Because that's what it seems like this process is right now. I'm very disappointed in it, because I think between myself, my wife, my mother, and the Walshes, we're all the immediate people. So yes, I do understand that it meets these requirements, but I do still think, like I said at the last meeting, this lot will be quite a bit smaller than the rest of the lot. We have natural wildlife and woodland there that we have less and less of in the city at all times. And I'm just kind of confused as to how this is an addition to the city. I think that the idea that something is acceptable doesn't necessarily make it good. I guess that's my concern here. And I guess I'm running out of time here for my time, I suppose, but I guess I'd like to ask about the environmental impact study. Has that been completed? I haven't seen any mention of it, and I think that's an important consideration here. And so, I guess I don't have a whole lot else to say. What's that? Yeah. So my mother, you know, if you, this isn't going to take more than a few minutes. So my mother wrote this letter. My name is Janet Thomason. I recently moved to 1009 South High Street. My son urged me to come to and promised me a secluded spot with large trees and plenty of nature. I was quite discouraged to hear that the city is thinking of approving extensive tree removal and subdivision of 1100 South Brooks, which is in my immediate backyard. I was able to follow the events of the last meeting on the subject, and I did not hear any arguments to change my mind regarding the subdivision of the existing lot on Brooks. So I realize this is more of a, this is my chance to air grievances, but I would like the answers, though, about the environmental impact study. And is this just a rubber stamp of the EDO, like these different qualifications have been met? Yes, it's going to have a sidewalk. I personally, you know, of all the things there, I don't think the street needs a sidewalk. So, you know, that's a dead-end street with very little traffic on it. Why does it need a sidewalk? Why is that even considered as part of whether or not we develop this property? I think there's other attributes to this property and to this plan that are more critical to the success. And I really wish that everybody here, like my wife said about the monolith, how did it come to pass that we were going to have a $1.1 million monolith that nobody seemed to know anything about, and we already spent the money, and then thankfully it was, you know, stopped because it was silly. You know, every town in the world doesn't need a monolith in front of it. Just like, you know, just because Martinsville has one, do we need one now? Actually, Martinsville has two, so I think if anything, that means we should have 0 monoliths. So thank you all for your time, and I hope you can come to a good resolution on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
We have one on Zoom.
All right.
Ms. Ochoa, you should be able to speak.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Terrific. So my name is Christiana Ochoa, and I own the property just north of the division in question. I'm at 2202 East Woodstock Place, which directly abuts that property just to the north. And I was not able to attend the first public hearing, which came with very little notice and as quite a surprise to me. And my schedule simply did not afford me the ability to attend the first hearing. And so I feel a bit at a disadvantage for the, you know, just dearth of information, because of course there were no minutes or anything like that conveyed back to the, you know, budding residents, which is a little bit of a disappointment in terms of just, you know, good process and information. But I wanted to also reiterate some of what the other neighbors to that property have said. So I you know, again, I live here. I bought this property actually very much because of the secluded nature of the backyard. It was a huge feature and part of the reason that I saw the value of the house, which was quite high at the time, to be, you know, worth the value. This feels to me like a significant depreciation of the asset that I have invested in here, and definitely depreciation of my quality of life. The tree cover that is there on that land is, you know, is both significant for quality of life and also for privacy. And importantly, during the time that I've lived here, I want to really elevate what my neighbors have said about the wildlife in the area. It is, you know, not just a human pleasure to have wildlife in the area. It is actually, you know, the wildlife themselves have value, and there are foxes, there are deer, there are owls that inhabit the trees that you're considering removing. And you know, while those owls are not an endangered species, they are protected and they are valuable, and they're very valuable for a number of reasons, including, you know, just their own intrinsic value, in addition to human value of removing rodents and things like that. But I would imagine, you know, also want to elevate the comments of the speaker who immediately preceded me. I also agree that although the stated requirements of the the application might have been met, that does not mean that it is a good decision to approve it. It feels to me very important to understand the environmental and ecological impacts of a decision like this one, and the impacts on the quality of life of the residents that surround it. So unlike the Thomasons, who have lived there, really their entire adult lives, and absolutely that has tremendous value. There are also residents who made the decision to invest in the immediate neighborhood because of the value of the sort of environmental surroundings, and the woods are incredibly important for that. So I urge the commission to consider the importance of maintaining the environmental quality of our city, and really placing significant additional value on the few remaining places that we have in the residential areas of significant wooded lands, of which that is one. And I very much agree that it's actually very difficult for me to understand why the value of being able to put in a 6-foot sidewalk is more important than the value of maintaining tree cover that has wildlife that depends on it and that will not easily re-inhabit that space. There is no need for a sidewalk there. I walk my dog there basically every day, and have never had any trouble needing a sidewalk, but I have also, I know that it is absolutely a fact that the fox, the deer, and the owls that live there absolutely and 100% need the tree cover that is there. And so I urge the Planning Commission to really consider the importance of the few remaining densely wooded areas that we have in the city, and to not always place the primacy of additional residential areas and sidewalks over the importance of the environmental quality of life that we have in these areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment on DP 3623?
Don't see anyone else with a raised hand on Zoom.
All right. Well, then we are back to the commission for any additional questions, comments, or a motion. Go ahead.
All right, a couple of questions. We may as well clear up a few of the things that were raised from the comments from the petitioners, or from the public comments, sorry. First, I wonder if we could get clarification again on that second building. Gabriel, can you review that aspect of this proposal and where that second building
Certainly.
is?
I'll try to pull up the presentation here, but while I'm pulling it up, the subdivision request, the request for subdivision approval here is for the land, the property lines. So what is how that land is developed outside of the sidewalks, street trees that are in the right-of-way that is being required as part of the subdivision. So outside of that, what's developed on the property is not part of this review or approval. It'll be subject to its own review and approval criteria. That being said, the subdivider, the petitioner, has indicated a possible use for the property as a single-family home, and has shown a footprint, and is proposed tree clearing to be able to use it in that way. So let's see if we can. Okay, so here we were. So this is from the site improvement plan that's part of the packet. It's not clearly labeled, so it's worth going over this to make it clear. There are two building footprints shown here. The lower one is existing. That's the existing house that's there on the property now. The one to the north, you'll notice it's a perfect rectangle. That is not existing, and it's it's not actually proposed either. It's merely an illustration of where a reasonable sized house could fit on the lot. If this subdivision is approved and recorded, after that, if someone came along and proposed a building permit for a single-family detached dwelling that matched that footprint, I would be able to say that it is the footprint is UDO compliant. So that's the indication there. There's no requirement that a structure on that lot be built according to that footprint, and there's no requirement that any structure ever be built on that lot. This is showing what a possible use of this lot would be. So I recognize that's a little confusing, but I hope that makes it clearer.
Thank you. Yep, I think it does. And the other clarification, I think, was about the tree preservation percentage, and it is 60%, correct? That's preserved?
Of the existing
existing,
area
yeah.
must be preserved, and they're proposing to preserve at least 65%. I would defer to the petitioner for more details, but in staff's conversation with the petitioner, our indication is that what is shown here is the maximum tree clearing that would be necessary. So if it turns out that the use of the lot is, the proposed use of of lot 2 to the north is such that there doesn't need to be any tree clearing and it can remain completely wooded, that's a possible outcome. This approval is saying that this amount of tree clearing is acceptable and UDO compliant, but it's not guaranteeing that all of this tree area will be removed.
Okay, good. All right, and then there was a question about an environmental impact study, and my sense of reading the packet was that there weren't any environmental concerns, so I wonder if you could clear up when an environmental impact would be a part of a proposal like this, or if there are discussions about environmental impact.
Yeah, I would defer to other people in the room who may know more about environmental impact studies, but what I can say is that the Unified Development Ordinance, the City of Bloomington, UDO, does not have any requirement for an environmental impact study for any development ever in the city. So staff did not request one. It is not part of the packet. To my knowledge, none has been done on this property, but that's to my knowledge, simply because I haven't seen one. Someone might have done one. We haven't seen if there is one, and the reason we haven't seen it is because there's no requirement for one to be done.
Right, okay. And then last pesky question, the logic of the sidewalk, the fact that a sidewalk is part of the UDO and is part of our process here. Can you help make sure that we all understand when a sidewalk is part of a site proposal plan like this?
Yeah, so it gets a little confusing because there are different situations, some which you look at when a sidewalk would not necessarily be required. The transportation plan, the City of Bloomington adopted transportation plan calls for sidewalks on both sides of all streets throughout the entire city. From that, there are certain approvals or development proposals that trigger compliance with that. A subdivision always triggers compliance with that part of the transportation plan. There are other things, for example, building a new house on an existing lot on a street where there are no sidewalks, that does not trigger compliance with that part of the transportation plan. But even in that case, the underlying transportation plan for the entire city is sidewalks on both sides of all streets. So this being a subdivision, it triggers that, implementing that part of the plan, which is how there's a requirement for a sidewalk here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think that cleared up the issues that I heard in some of the comments.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So just to further explain for the public, you stated that subdivision triggers the compliance in plain language. Not that that wasn't understandable, but if you're going to subdivide, you got to put in a sidewalk. But why?
That's correct.
Like why? What's the thinking there? Can you, for the benefit of the public, can you say why that's important?
I would like to say I have the transportation memorized so I could pull up the purpose statement, but just generally, having sidewalks is a feature of city streets that provides mobility, as we say, but mobility, in other words, a way to get around for a wide variety of people. Most people, many people drive cars, but not everyone. And it's true, not everyone uses a sidewalk, but it is probably one of the things that the most number of people use. A lot of people walk. Some people who don't walk use wheelchairs on the sidewalk. Some people who don't walk because they're babies go in a stroller. So it's one of the most accessible forms of mobility, and it's perfect for it's a perfect kind of mobility for when you've got a relatively dense places to go, which happens in a settled area like a city. So if you were to go to Yellowwood State Forest, it kind of makes sense that there might not be sidewalks through all there. Maybe that's a bad example because there's nice trails, but so the city is an appropriate place for it. So the idea, without getting to quote from the transportation plan directly, the idea is to provide this kind of mobility throughout the city is the idea behind it. Now, you'll recognize that this sidewalk will not connect anywhere to the north because the street ends, and will not connect anywhere to the south because the adjacent properties there have not yet had anything to trigger compliance with the sidewalk. The hope is that to build a network, it's made up of nodes and links, and sometimes you have to build those links one at a time. So the transportation plan is envisioning a time, the transportation plan is truly envisioning a time when there's sidewalks on both sides of every single street in the city. While that's not true, this is an opportunity to put one segment in the network. It will not connect to anything for a while.
Yeah, so the idea is at least we'll get some links in there so that eventually maybe when the sidewalk is put in the whole street, it will just link up to what's already in there.
That's the plan's vision, yeah.
Okay, because I think for the public it gets confusing that, of course, sidewalks are wonderful for a whole host of reasons, but I think it does get confusing when there's a requirement to put in a sidewalk that goes to nowhere.
Sure, I'd like to add, I mean, sidewalks are also useful for the people who are living in the home, right? Like in this house in particular, we spoke to a potential property owner who was going to have mobility issues, and we were talking to them about possibly having a pull-off for a car, for someone in a wheelchair to be able to sit comfortably without having to be in the road. A user of that house could, in the future, potentially have that same issue, and a sidewalk could feel like a safer place, even if other people think it's silly or it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense to everyone. They can be useful for the user of that property as well. And one of the public comments said, you know, why are we getting sidewalk and getting rid of trees? They're not related. Those two things aren't related. We get sidewalks through subdivision. We have separate codes in Chapter 5 related to how many trees need to be preserved, and those will also be met. We're not exchanging sidewalk for tree here. And I know that Mr. Holbrow has already said this, but just to reiterate, there is no proposal for development here. So this is just creating a lot that could potentially be developed. And as you all know, but for those watching who maybe don't come here every month, we are constantly balancing priorities. So yes, environmental priority is very important. Some people would like for no more development to happen. We also have a housing shortage. That is also important, and we are trying to find ways to have more houses be available. And one of the ways we did that was by lowering the minimum lot size in these zoning districts in a very public process in 2020. And so that this is now happening because of that. It's one additional lot that is owned by someone who would like, who has made by all indications, preserve as many trees as possible, and may possibly build a home there someday in the future, and that's all entirely allowed by the UDO. I understand the inclination to be disappointed when your neighbor is doing something, when you buy a property because you like something that's going on near you, but that is the way the UDO does not work to protect what people like about other people's properties. It's trying to have uniform development across the city and doing its best to protect things like environmental issues while still allowing for progression and new homes. So that is what we're balancing here. And when, I understand that it feels like a rubber stamp, but it's because it's a list of requirements and they're meeting all of them. And then it's a public process to make sure that people know that they are doing that. And so that's why we're here. We had it at Plat Committee, we had a number of neighbors, and we thought we should take the second stage to Plan Commission so that more people can, might feel comfortable or be able to come out in an evening as opposed to, 4 p.m. And that's why we're here. So I hope that was helpful.
Thanks. That was more than the sidewalk, but all of that I think is helpful, and I know why we do sidewalks like that, but I think it's always helpful to put in very plain language for people who don't hang out here and do this, to understand why we build sidewalks in little links, and the thinking behind that as an actual strategy instead of just a compliance issue. So thanks, I appreciate that. Plus, your other comments I also appreciate. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Seymour.
Two quick questions. One is just on the tree preservation calculations and just the process. Hypothetically, 2 lots exist. The calculations in the graphics we've seen right now have assumed 1 owner on 1 lot. What if it's owned by separate properties, separate owners? Like, how are those long-term managed?
I think I'm understanding your question, so I'm going to answer, and if it doesn't answer your question, please correct me. So right now, we're looking at this as a subdivision proposal. Currently today, it's 1 property under 1 ownership. So we're looking at the entire tract. Well, actually, even if it were separate ownership, it's an entire tract that you are considering approving this secondary plat for. And so we apply those percentages to that entire tract. After the subdivision is complete, any amount of time, but let's take hypothetically 40 years from now, let's pretend the UDO hasn't changed. And they're under separate ownership, they have been for decades. Someone comes with a proposal to remove a bunch of trees on one of the properties. If the UDO didn't change, we would look at the closed canopy just on that property. So that's one of the reasons that, so that means that potentially, without the UDO changing, potentially there could be more tree clearance treating these separately. So that's one reason to approach it now. So, if the petitioner had tried to sort of slip something in underhandedly and say, we're not going to clear any trees, the subdivision gets approved, and then, the lot is sold, and then a new person owns the second lot, they could probably clear a lot more trees. So this is treating it this way as one part gets the UDO to require, to make sure, to ensure that there's more tree preservation. However, if there were, so in a larger subdivision where, or not necessarily the subdivision is larger, but a closed canopy wooded area where more than a half acre has to be preserved, it would have to be put into an easement, either conservancy easement or tree preservation easement, and that would make sure that that would always continue. So right now, under this proposal, the UDO does not require any tree preservation easement, so there's not, there wouldn't be a way to track indefinitely into the future that only this amount of trees would be removed.
Great, thank you. That did answer my question, and our attorney just left, and my next question was going to be directed to him, but I know from planning staff might be able to answer this, but in another organization I've worked at before, a plan commission did not approve something that was completely compliant with the code, and the city was ultimately sued and spent numerous legal fees and ended up resulting to the original proposal as well. This appears to meet the law. Like, what is the risk of the city not approving something that appears to meet all of the standards?
I think I heard most of that, Commissioner Seabour. Michael Rooker, City Attorney. Yeah, there's always a risk of when there's a denial of an appeal. I'm not going to speak to the specifics of any particular case. I don't think that's appropriate in this circumstance or in this venue, but if there's a denial where there aren't appropriate grounds for a commission like the Plan Commission that has a duty to review and approve petitions under an ordinance that's passed by the legislative body, the City Council, the legislative body of the City of Bloomington, there's always a risk that that could be appealed and the decision could be overturned. We certainly have seen that in this community and other communities in the past.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Maybe just a quick follow-up on that. If in fact this does meet the letter of the law, why have this hearing at all? Why do we review these cases? Is it simply because we review all subdivisions?
I think Jackie or Ms. Scanlon may be able to address that as well. I think she mentioned earlier this would often be the sort of thing that's just reviewed by the Plat Committee. This one happened to come to the Plan Commission because there's a process for reviewing subdivisions. So,
can I take a stab at that one?
Yeah.
So, a process that often happens is this body reviewing secondary plats is a little unusual. I'm not sure when the last one was that you've seen. A more typical process that we go through is the primary plat, which is the first version, is either reviewed by you here at the Plan Commission or by the Plat Committee. Then one of the conditions is secondary plat approval is delegated to staff. So that happens a lot. In this case, the Plat Committee declined to, staff recommended that condition, and the Plat Committee declined to include that condition. So secondary plat was not delegated to staff. So then it was brought to you. More generally, why do we have a public hearing if you're just making sure everything's compliant? There's different possible answers to that. One answer I would like to give is I, as a member of the staff of the Planning and Transportation Department, with Jackie Scanlon, my manager and my colleagues as well, and working with the petitioner, went over this plat as many times as we could. But that's 3 people, and we do this as our jobs. I feel pretty confident, but we can miss things. And so there's a benefit, even if it is just saying, yeah, you're right, it meets. There's a benefit to taking it to the public, making sure that members of the public don't have additional information that we missed. Make sure that you don't have information that we missed, that you don't find parts of the code that we missed. Things like that. I think there's value in bringing it to this forum, even when staff is saying it's fully compliant. So you'll notice that the staff report has proposed findings, and those remain proposed until you adopt them. And so that's really the decision. And I'm sure you have had cases where you've changed the findings based on the facts that have come out in the hearing. And so that's the value. That's one answer I would give for why do we have a public hearing at all.
But, yeah, procedurally, though, it's because the plat committee decided to send it here instead of to staff. Is that-
Procedurally, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the short, simple answer, yes.
Yeah, and which is atypical.
It is atypical, yes.
Thanks. All right, any other questions? Go ahead,
I
Commissioner
have a
Kinsey.
comment. I mean, I do think that the UDO is invoked here because it is what we're using as guidance for these proposals, and I think it is important to acknowledge the fact that the UDO was an extensive document that was a very public process. It was long deliberated and discussed in this community with particular goals and purposes and procedures. So in some ways, I find the comments about how this does not get, or that this decision or this issue right here is not getting as much comment or notice is not quite on the up and up, because I think the UDO is the point where we really want to have a public process for determining what we want for our community. And it was a really long process, having sat through many hours of it and lots of public comment. I really feel like we did come up with a great unified development ordinance, and one that was thoughtfully developed with a great deal of public input. So I feel like, you know, the whole point of the UDO is to really make it possible to be more transparent about what is allowed and what we desire, not less. And it's not designed to be it's not designed to be a rubber stamp. The point of it is to be clear with a great deal of public input about what we want for our community. So I do feel like it is a very important ground to stand on because of the public process that it was developed under and approved. So it does set a vision for our community. So on those grounds, I feel good about this process and about what we want for this space, and one of them being greater infill in neighborhoods that can accommodate greater housing, which is a stated need and goal in our process. And so I am in favor of this subdivision for those reasons, that I feel like it is well spelled out in the UDO, and I think the petition and the staff have worked in a very dedicated way to make sure that the appropriate preservation is considered here, and that the policies and practices that are part of the UDO are going to be fulfilled. So I feel really good about this as a decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or a motion? Just as a reminder, the staff recommendation is that we adopt the proposed findings and approve the secondary plat with one condition, that the petitioner shall provide a financial performance guarantee in compliance with the UDO. So,
Given that I just stated my positive view on this proposal, I will motion for adopt the proposed findings and approve the secondary plat of DP 36-23 with the one condition as stated, that they'll provide the financial performance guarantee in compliance with the UDO section 20.060C3E III before the Planning and Transportation Director signs and seals the plat.
all right, the motion is that we adopt the proposed findings and approve the secondary plat with the condition as included in the packet. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Is there any final discussion before we call the roll? I'll just say I don't necessarily like this. I'm sure if I lived on this street, I wouldn't like it. And I certainly appreciate the comments from the neighbors here. But the reality is that we're not dictators with unlimited power to just shut down things we don't like, and that's probably a good thing, right? There's rules and laws in place that govern these things, and in this case, the law has been met, and there's really just not much more we can or probably should do. And so, as much as I sympathize with the neighbors here, I think I'll support this as well. Any other comments?
I think, kind of going off that as well, completely understand where you're coming from, but as I think Jackie mentioned, we're dealing with a massive housing shortage here that's an epidemic. I'm in a real estate background. I've been in it for several years, so I can understand where you're coming from, but I can also understand working on a daily basis with people who cannot afford housing. The price of housing continues to increase on a weekly basis. It's a very difficult housing situation, and I do believe that based on what the UDO has provided us with, if it is a single-family home, will be met to the letter of the law because it has to be, guided by the UDO, keeping some canopy, keeping some nature, and to me, I think that's a good balance we want to try to continue to keep. And also, I don't think whether it's a developer, big or small, I think that's an important and integral part of this community, the developers who come in here, so I will be supporting this as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Any final comments? Go ahead.
Similarly sympathize. I wouldn't like it either, honestly, but we do have the UDO. It's a rule book. It's the middle of the game. We can't pick and choose which rules we enforce and don't enforce. It's the same for everyone. Prior to the UDO, the comments were, we don't have a clear set of rules. Make a clear set of rules, which was done. Now we can't just throw them out here and there at the will of the people sitting up here. As Commissioner Kinsey said, it was a very public, long, much longer than I thought it would be, process, which was good. And then it went before the city council, again deliberated over and over and over a long period of time. And we can't just pick apart the rules for this, which is too bad, but we can't. And so I'll support this too because it complies with the UDO.
Any final comments? Go ahead.
Make a comment also, because I'm glad that the point about infill in established neighborhoods was brought up, because that is part of the philosophy that Ms. Scanlon referenced, that, you know, that we're trying to balance here is between appropriate development within the city in order to provide affordable housing. You know, as someone who has a piece of property that is also being affected by city plans, I understand where you're coming from. But you know, we're thinking about the public good. Part of that includes affordable housing, and so because this is within the bounds of the UDO, I'll support it as well. So,
Thank you. All right, I think we are ready to call the roll. I'm sorry, ma'am, the period for public comment has passed. Will you please call the roll?
Seaboard,
Yes.
Korodke,
yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
and Ballard.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion passes 6-0, and that is the final petition on our agenda this evening. Any other announcements before we adjourn?
That's it.
All right, we are adjourned. We will see you back here in December.
Thank you.
Thank you.